It's about to start, we'll talk about code or whatever we'll talk about today. It's about to start, so please hang tight while I check that everything is okay. Sound, check. Camera, check. Lights, check. How's my hair? Oh, wait, I don't have any hair. Maybe put some pants on and I am good to go. So get ready wherever you are, 'cause this stream is about to start. Get ready wherever you are, 'cause this stream is about to start. Hello, my name is Linda Facchinetti, and let's write some code together, shall we? What we have on the menu today is this waveform display, and if you're new here, what we are doing on this channel, on the live streams for the better part of this year, we are working on a library in JSFX that allows you to have real-time plugins in REAPER. And we are focusing on the visual aspects. So the visualization of the waveform is going to help you see what a compressor is doing, for instance. So when we get to build a compressor, we will be using this kind of component. And to begin with, we just have a simple plugin that is supposed to be on the track control panel or the mixer control panel. And it will show the waveform scrolling across, just like this. So this is the plugin we are working on. It's more like it's a utility thing. It is useful, but it's more like a demonstration of what the library component is supposed to be able to do. And specifically what we are planning on doing today, it's on the title of the stream, is to be able to zoom into this waveform. Right now, we do have this notion of taking the square root, but this changes the proportion of things. It changes where things show up, and it devotes more space to the lower level signal. And this is not the same as, so this is like compressing or expanding the scale on the y-axis. What we're planning on doing today is a simple zoom. So you may want to see things linear, but zoom in. So that's what we are up to. It's this part. Oh, and there is this other to-do here from the past that I think we have addressed yesterday. So let's think about this right after we are done with the zoom. Famous last words. Anytime I say, okay, we'll do this and then get to that, we barely scratch the surface of the first task. And I already see a peekaboo here, so there's no chance we're gonna get to this. Anyway, we will do zoom. And this is a node comment, so I don't really remember all the details. Let's load back the context into our brains. Okay, maybe have an X, Y, width, and height of temporary image as arguments. So this comment was from the time when we had temporary images being drawn off screen. I don't even want to recap that because it was complicated. We got rid of it. We are doing something simpler now. And it also happens to be faster. It works even better. Even if you have both channels here. That was an issue we had with the other version. And this one works fine. Great. Let's not worry about... Oh, what happens if you turn on the grid? Does that work? Oh yeah, it seems to. Okay, anyway, zoom, let's get to this. I will remove these comments. Let's not worry about that. When I tap the cable, yeah, you hear that. I will try not to tap the cable. Okay, how are we going to do this zoom? we will introduce some new sliders. So let's start with that. We have a bunch of sliders actually. We'll have two more. Or do we want to be able to zoom on the vertical axis? I don't think so, because the duration kind of already does that for you. But the duration changes the inner workings of the library and everything. But because of the way we structure the library, I will not get into the details, but because of the way we structure the library, horizontal zoom is annoying for us to do. And I would guess that in most applications, horizontal zoom is not as big of a deal as vertical zoom. Because if your signal is relatively quiet, like my microphone, you probably would want to be able to zoom into the waveform vertically. But once you have set the duration that you care about, for this component, for this plugin, you would like to stay with that duration. And I think of this being used on something like a compressor. So you can imagine the little Pro C2 interface where there is a rectified waveform scrolling by, showing the ins and outs, so you can see how much attenuation the compressor is doing. So in that case, again, you may want to zoom in and out vertically, and that's something the Pro C2 does, but I don't think it does zoom on the horizontal axis. So we'll not worry about zoom in the horizontal axis. We'll just worry about zoom in the vertical axis. And where do we want this slider to be? We have a couple sliders here that determine determine some parameters of how the waveform should be displayed. This is for color, then an option for grids. So all of those are more like static settings that you would decide on, and then you would create perhaps an effects chain. I think that would be my preferred route. So you would save this as an effects chain. And can you save as effects chain from here? I don't think you can. Anyhow, so you would use all these sliders and then forget about them. But this last one, you would continue tweaking depending on the kind of signal that is coming in. So I think I am going to set this as a last slider here. Of course, I will want a gap, so I'll jump slider 13 and go directly to 14. And because I will do zoom in a single axis, the vertical one, I'll just call it zoom. By default, it will be 1. I will allow you to go from 0.1 to 3. Yeah, to 3 in steps of 0.1. And what is the unit of measurement? It's just a multiplier, so I will not put anything in parentheses. No unit of measurement. Okay, now we have a slider. It's here. But what we want is to hook this slider into the call of the drawing function. So let's do that now. So it's this. This is the call to the drawing function. And it is getting big, but yeah, this is the call to the drawing function. So let's look at the arguments for this and see where the zoom could fit in. So we have the X, Y, width, and height. Perhaps, maybe not, I don't know. It doesn't really matter all that much, but let's see. The duration, I guess I would do zoom here because it sort of matches what we did on the interface. But this has to do with dimensions. And this doesn't even have dimensions. So I guess I will do zoom here. I'll do zoom there. Whatever, it's no big deal. So now we have this number coming in, and we have to use this. So we have introduced an argument. Right after height, And let's see if we broke something. I don't think we did. But we introduced a new argument. And everything seems to still work the same. So let's commit what we have. I don't know why I'm committing this, such a simple change, but I'm committing it anyway. I'm committed to committing it. Now let's actually use this. And it has to be used on the drawing of the waveform as well as on the drawing of the grid. Let's get this step by step. We start by drawing the waveform. We loop over the circular buffer with the segments. I'm calling them the lines that we want to draw. And then we take the minimum, the maximum, then we clip. I think that we want to zoom around here. And do we want to zoom before or after the square root? After, but before clipping. Yeah, I stand by that. And that should be enough. Let's check this. Oh, yeah, I have to say something, and then I can zoom and make it smaller as well, in case the signal is too hot. And even with 3, it seems like this is not a big waveform. So perhaps I'm going from 1 down to 0.1, and that's 10 times less, right? 0.1 is 1 divided by 10. So let's go from 1 to 10, and is 10 going to work well? Yeah, 10 seems to do the trick. So you can go down to 0.1, you can be at 1, or you can zoom all the way in. And note how this is not the same as having a zoom of 1 and taking the square root. In both cases, you see more of the waveform, but in this case, the silence and the signal are closer together. And in that one, where I am zooming in, the proportion is just completely different. So that's what the square root does. And I think that in general, I prefer the zoom to the square root. I was using square root in most of my demonstrations so far because I wanted the waveform to be thicker, but I think I prefer this view. Anyhow, is there anything else that we need to do? Yes, we need to deal with the lines, the grid. I'll turn on the grid, and this is going to be slightly annoying to test, so I'm not going to worry too much. Oh, I will. Okay, I will take the hit. I will do it. Okay, so I'm going to change this so I only see the first one, the one that is using the zoom, but not using square root. Then I turn the grid on, and I will leave this as large as I can because I want this to be relatively visible. And I will change the source, so we will not be plotting my microphone. We will be plotting a tone generator. And we are going to be using this for calibrating the signal. So let's see, -12 is over there. And yeah, it's already way off, right? Because -12 should be here on this line, but because we are zooming in, yeah, it's all the way zoomed in, and the grid lines are not zoomed in. So I think that the grid lines should stay where they are, and when you zoom in, we should change the labels. That is what we determined was best when we did the grid lines. And that's because when you are deciding the position of the grid lines, that is the most comfortable way for you to read the labels. And once you got that going, Then the waveform can go in and out. You can zoom in, you can take the square root and whatnot, or maybe even change the duration of things. And all of those have an effect. I don't know if you can see this because it's gray. It's gray on gray. But when I change the duration, it changes the labels. And similarly, when I change square root, it changes the labels on this axis, but the grid lines stay in the same place. So that's what I'm going to continue doing with the zoom feature. But first, hello, Bo. It's going good. It's going good. It's going well. It is going okay. I'm glad to see you here. How is it going with you? All right, so in some point, hang on, this is the main axis. This is the duration. We are not changing that. Let's go to the next one. This is drawing the dB. And it seems like it will be around here that we want to change things. Yeah, so this is drawing the line, and this is computing the label. So we want to change the label. And we want to change the content of the label. So that's this stuff up here. So we do a linear to dB. And when do we want to multiply this? I think we want to multiply this after the square root, because that's what we did with the drawing of the waveform. So we want to multiply after the square root, but before we take dB. So I think we want to multiply at this point. Now that I put this times equal, I think I had, yeah, this line is silly. Well, it's not silly, but it should be like this. And there you have it. All right, let's try this again. So we have a grid line, and the duration, we just put this at 96. Perhaps we should be able to go above that to 200, just to get rid of that. Yeah, what is 96 times 2? 194. There you go. And this only goes up to 48. Yeah, we probably want a bit more space than that. I'll go to that. 192 as well. And why not 24 on this axis? Why not? Okay, turn on the grid. And that's just the nature of this game, isn't it? Anytime we introduce one feature like vertical, drawing vertically. So right now it's drawing horizontally, we can draw vertically. The waveform goes from top down. Anytime we add one of these features like vertical or zoom or grid, it interacts with every other feature. We add a grid, and then now we have to think about how is the horizontal orientation, the vertical orientation going to influence that. And then we add, what do we add? We add zoom and interacts with the grid, and it interacts with the orientation. It just compounds. We should avoid features at all costs. All right, so I'll drop this in here again just because I forget what I was doing. Turn on the grid, the duration goes away, and the volume gap, it can be something like Yeah, I'll do this. I will test at this. And then zoom. Oh, this is not doing what it's supposed to. It's going up in the dB scale. It should be going down in the dB scale. So I don't think I want to multiply. I perhaps want to divide by a zoom. I think so. Yeah, to compensate the change. All right. Let's do this. Let's do this. So yeah, -5. And as I zoom in, yep, now that's behaving like it should, I think. Right, let's put in a signal and... Oh, check this out, at -12, that's what it is. It's a signal at -12, so I can make the grid line touch the waveform at -12. Let's get back... No, this is already working, but I'll check it anyway. -5 goes up there, that's okay. If I zoom out, then let's do a 3 dB, positive this time, positive 3 dB. Yeah, it seems to be working. All right, we got this. Yeah, so any change we make to the waveform when drawing, like multiplying by zoom, we need to make the opposite change, like dividing by zoom. Aha! And this makes a lot of sense, because I am making the waveform bigger, so I should make the label smaller to compensate. And this finally explains why this worked when I was implementing the square root function. It just takes the square root of whatever value we have on the waveform or on the samples coming in. So just take the square root. And I was puzzled by the fact that the grid didn't work. I had to square instead. And I squared just because I was like, this is not working when I take the square root. So I guess I will just try squaring. And it worked. And I was like, why? Now I understand, because I have to compensate the change doing the opposite change. So if I multiply, I need to divide. If I take the square root, I need to take the square. There you have it. That's it. Got it. Glad to hear, Bo. How do you like the effect finally coming together? We have been working on this since, I guess, October. Not on the waveform itself, but on the library, on the notion of real objects as opposed to pseudo objects. We tried JSFX. We tried so many things, and now we're finally landing on something that I think is pretty cool. So yeah, first of all, thanks for joining me on this ride, Bo. I really appreciate you being here. And also, I would love to hear from you how you're liking the first plugin coming together. Even though it's a simple plugin, it is a nice one. And Joseph is here. Hello. It's great to have you here. Is this a reference to Vaporwave? Because if it is, then I'm on your side. I appreciate you. All right. Just 4 or 5 lines to implement zoom. That makes me happy. I guess the abstractions we are using to draw the labels on the axis, for instance. The grid has little labels and we have some abstractions in place for positioning and everything. It seems like we landed on good abstractions because we were able to implement this relatively straightforwardly. Now there is this notion of clicking and dragging to zoom. This is a can of worms and I'm not sure I want to go there right now. Hey Tail, it's great to have you here. Yeah. I will not do user interfaces with click and drag right now for the sole reason that we have not touched the mouse stuff in JSFX, and it is so bare bones, and I don't remember all the details. I have read the documentation, but I have never actually used it. I have never actually used the mouse stuff. And I know that is very low level, so I don't want to learn that right now. A way to control whether or not the waveforms reset on playback start. Let's see what they are doing right now. I think that they just erase, because I think that the init block runs and it erases the memory. But anyway, let's give it a try. So I have some signal going through, and when I hit playback, it resets. And that's the behavior that is currently working because of the init block working the way that it does. You can, if you want, you can set ext no init to 1. And when you do that, it will not rerun the init block on playback start, so it will not erase the waveform. This is amazing. What the hell happened? Why this has such an impact on the waveform display drawing? This makes no sense. What the heck? I have a clue of why this is happening, and it makes me so sad. I think I know why this is happening, and it's the worst. Oh, fuck. Okay. If you set this, then the init block is not supposed to be running on playback start. Let's investigate this on the test effect. We have this test effect. We wrote this yesterday just to make sure the init and the slider block, they both run when you hit playback. And the serialized block is just here to make sure that, whatever, I forget. It is necessary to make the init block behave in the way that I typically like it to behave. So I just got into the habit of always having a serialized block, even if it doesn't do anything. Anyway, let's see what this does. Okay, the test the test effect tells us that the init and the slider block don't run once, they run twice. So, right, every time that the block runs, this variable gets incremented. It starts with a 0, because every variable in JSFX starts with a 0. This means that the block ran twice. Why twice? I have no idea. Anyway, when I hit play, you can see that it goes to 3. And when I stop, it goes to 4. So it seems to be running the init and the slider block anytime you hit start, when the playback starts. Also, when the playback ends, it's not documented this way, I don't think. I think that the documentation doesn't say that. I think that it says on effects load and on playback start. And on sample rate changes. So perhaps it's running twice when you start because the effect has been loaded and then it sets these things up. I don't know. In any case, when you start playback, it runs. When you stop playback, it also runs. Go figure. And the slider block gets executed following an init, which makes sense, right? These two numbers are in sync. Unless you, of course, change sliders around. Then this block is going to run and that one is not, and then the numbers will get out of sync, but we don't have sliders, so these two numbers should always be the same. So far, so good. Now let's introduce ext no init. I don't know why I command F dash. It was on the screen already, and I saw it on the screen. Anyway, when I set this to 1, I'm going to reload the plugin because I want to make sure that the initial state. Oh, okay, check this out. The initial state is already behaving differently. So it ran once, And now, if I understand the documentation right, this number should never change, and this number should continue to change anytime I play, or perhaps not, because the slider block should only run after the init block unless I touch the slider, so perhaps it will not change at all. Yeah, take your bets. What do you think is going to happen when I hit play? I think that the numbers are going to be the same. Do you think that the slider block will run? Do you think that the init block will run? Do you think that both will run? Do you think I am a fool for making these experiments because we are not... Oh yeah, we are investigating that bug. Yeah, okay, yeah, that's what we're doing. I'm all over the place. Right, so I hit play and the numbers didn't change. I hit stop and the numbers didn't change. Okay, so that's what's up. We set this, and then these variables don't change. Why is this behavior making the library print funny colors on the waveform display? Oh, I turned that off. Let's get it back on. I have an intuition for why this may be happening. Let's investigate if this is the case. So there is this background color thing here. And this is taking a color as an argument. This is what resets the background color to any particular color we like. This color is stored in memory because it's actually a chunk of 3 items in memory, red, green, and blue. So it's a piece of memory. And we are also writing to memory over here on the audio thread. The audio is coming through, and we are writing to memory, so that the user interface can display the samples as they come in. I think that the presence of this line is corrupting memory somehow, right? It's changing the way that memory is being interpreted. So this color right here is no longer a color. It is part of the audio. And that's why the colors keep changing. As I speak, different numbers will go in memory and we'll see different colors. I don't know. To test this out, I will comment this out and we'll see what we plot. Yeah, now see, now it's black. So that line was the offending one. And we are not drawing anything on the screen anymore, and that's probably because every other occurrence of color will try to change the colors, because we should still be drawing, right? We still have the code that writes these instructions to the screen, but they also take colors as arguments, and if the memory has been corrupted, colors are no longer colors, and in that case, we may not be setting any color, so we are writing this in black, which is the default color. And black on black will be like this. Okay, having this work is absolutely crucial to the library. We must be able to set this if we want. Suppose that the plugin needs to print the waveform even as you restart playback. It will just continue drawing the waveform of whatever audio is going through it. In some plugins, it is crucial for the functionality of the plugin for this to be set. Like, I think we did some synthesizer at some point, and that was a requirement. We talked about it with Dale, I think. Anyway, we need to make this work. And if my intuition is right, the offending part is this, where we set the colors. We also set a lot of other things like the rest of the design system, but this is where we set the colors. So hey, there you go. We are going to take the tangent and we'll never get to... Okay, in the beginning of the stream, I said I will get to... Oh, we are getting to the second thing. I was able to do zoom. We were able to do the zoom. Now we are getting to the second thing, which is this. And I thought we had it because we can reset on playback, but we cannot prevent resetting on playback. And we found this giant issue of not being able to set ext no init. No progress on the plugin. I've been doing some head scratching and might have come across an improvement on the smoothing formula. Okay. Thanks for... Oh, yeah, my pleasure. Oh no. It's one of those fluctuations, I guess, right? Every 3 days. That's terrible. All right. The invariant is this should only run once. We should only be initializing all of the colors and everything else once. So there are some changes that I want to commit, some that I don't. I will stop and look at the changes real quick. Yeah, these changes I want to commit, so I'll do that. And then we will have something like debug plus equals 1, and this number should be 1 at all times. It is 0. That is surprising to me. What is the value of JSFX initialize? It is false. But if initialize is false, false is represented by 0. If initialize is false, it means we ran this block, which means we should have gotten here, but we didn't. Is this not running? I will do another. I will do another variable. So top level JFX graphical effects. Did I save everything? I think I did. Running this again. Okay, the top level is running. That sets initialize to true. Hanging there. We define this constant below. How can this be? This constant is defined here at the end of the file, but it's used here above. That means this is set to 0. So this block should have never run. So our code should have never worked ever. It should have never worked, and yet it did. We set fonts and sizes and colors, and it all worked. What the fuck? True is also not initialized, right? You are always one step ahead, aren't you, Tail? Yes. How has this worked this entire time? I will use numbers instead of the constants. And now we are drawing. Bug fixed. But I am so paranoid about what just happened. And in fact, now the behavior is different. When I start playback, this will not reset. See, I start playback and the JSFX block doesn't rerun. Or sorry, the init block doesn't rerun. So it just continues plotting. Now, this has been like this, we're using true and false forever at this point. And it was working. Oh, but it wasn't working. Oh, I see. Oh, fuck. It was working because of that weird behavior. Remember, I came here to the documentation and said it doesn't really do what it says on the documentation because it doesn't run on effect load, or I guess the documentation doesn't say that it's going to run once on effect load. But the fact of the matter is that the init block runs twice on effect load. We saw that if you don't have ext no init, it runs twice, and then it runs every time you start playback. So it would run twice. The first time around, this true would not be set. But then it would reach, the first time around, it would reach this line, define the constant, and the second time around, it would set the variable. This is fascinating. The second time around, it would set this variable to 1. And then the JSFX block would run, and this block would run only once, and all of that would be good. Okay, I am happy that this was just this subtle behavior, and that ext no init actually works with the rest of the library, as it should, because if you allocate memory once, you should have the access to the memory, and the memory shouldn't be scrambled around. Great. Now let me see what Tail has been saying on the chat, and I'm sure that he will have figured out what I figured out, except 5 minutes earlier. Maybe it only worked because it's always run twice. I love how there are people who are much, much smarter than me and are willing to help me out. Thanks, Tail. You are absolutely right. That's what was happening. And I swear, I am not reading your lines and pretending that I had the insight. My second screen is so small that I just see that there are new lines, but I cannot read the new lines. This is my second screen. It's too small. I cannot read the new lines. But I do see your avatar, and I know that you're talking. So that's what's up. Indeed. Indeed. All right, now we know what the issue is. This is so in the weeds. This is so weird. Now, the solution is, of course, to just reorder things so that constants are available at the top level sooner, right? That's the solution. Let's see what we have changed. I will keep this. I don't care. In fact, this turns out to be super useful. And then this can come back. So this is the only change, but of course we need to pull the constants up. And I think I will do the constants right after I do enumeration. I think it's cute that undefined and error are using an enumeration, but I also think that perhaps it's too cute, so I don't know. And the operating system detection kind of goes into the constants umbrella, because there may be other constants or perhaps other weird variables like the JSFX initialized stuff that we saw above that may depend on the operating system. So I'll bring all of this up, and I will say that they they are perhaps the first things that happen in the file. And now I will not use enumerations because enumerations haven't been defined yet. And I will just do one more 9. One more 9, I said. And that's undefined. An error will be this. So it is the same logic as enumerations, but it's using a different counter and its own namespace, so to speak. And all of these are self-contained now. Even this, they are all self-contained. So they are available to the code below. And with that, when I load this, it is using the ext, what does it call it? The ext no init. It's using that. So it means that when I start playback, this doesn't change. And if I want, I can turn this off. And then when I start playback, it resets. To be frank, for this effect, I think that having this setting is what I want. But I will not have this as part of the library. I think that this is a decision you need to make as a developer. Either your plugin needs to reinitialize or not. In our case, I think we better not reinitialize. And I don't think there is an easy way for me to have this as a slider or something. Because either I don't have this variable, the init block runs on every playback, but it also zeroes out the memory, and there is nothing I can do about that. There is no way for me to say, I want to rerun the init block, but I want to preserve the memory, so it will reset. But if I have this on, the init block will not run, and there is no indication that we started playback. So there is no way for me to make this a slider. Well, I guess there is a way, but I don't want to go there. We can, from the block section, ask where the playhead is, and we can see if the playback is moving. If it is moving, so I guess the strategy would be, we would set this variable, we would detect that the playback head is moving, and then if the user wants, right, there would be a slider saying reset on playback, and if that happens, then I could reset in pretty much the way that I do here. Now that I said all this out loud, I will have to do it. I will have to do it. I will have to at least give it a try. So Joseph is asking, is it possible to download and test your waveform display? No, not right now. I will upload it, okay, after the stream. So here's the deal. I'm not going to do it now because it's not really interesting to watch. But there is a link in the description of this stream to go to my REAPER repository in REAPER. I will not put this in REAPER yet, okay? I will not put this in REAPER because it's not ready for consumption. We're still finding things out that we want to change. So it's not ready for consumption. I will not put it in REAPER, but I will push this. I am not pushing this code, but I will push it. So you will be able to come in here, and I know it's kind of a lot of work. Perhaps I should put this on REAPER. Yeah, how about the bullet? I will put this in REAPER. Yeah, after the stream, I will put this in REAPER. I'm taking notes. REAPER. I will do this sometime this evening or tomorrow. And then you will be able to test. Yeah, I can just put some like beta kind of thing. And then you can test it out, yeah. Thanks for asking, and thanks for the interest in testing this out. All right, so we are in this position where we want to give the user the option to reset on playback. Let's have a slider for this. And I think it belongs around here. So we'll add slider 5, reset on playback start, reset on play. Yeah, I think that will do. By default, I don't want to reset on play. I think I prefer that behavior. So we'll have an off or on, reset on play, and then we need to move all the sliders 1 to the right. So slider 6 becomes 7 and so forth. All right, so we are now, and this is not part of the library, okay? The library user, the developer using the library, will have to decide whether they want to rerun the init block or not, because it can lead to surprising behaviors. And in some situations, you want this for correctness of your plugin, but in some cases, you may want to not have this for the correctness of your plugin, so I will not take the executive decision of putting this in the library. I'm not even sure if it would work if it was in the library. For now, it lives here. But on the block, on this function, I will have to check. Yeah, sure. Well, thank you. You are welcome. Right, so let's see in the docs how we get the position of the playhead. Time functions, that's not it. Special variables. Play stage. Oh. We could look at play stage going from paused to, or stopped to playing, but it may be playing. If you want to reset, you may be playing and you just click somewhere and the playhead moves, and you do want that to cause a reset. That's the behavior of init as we saw previously. That's the behavior. If you don't have this, that's the behavior. You're playing, you click here, and the init block reruns. So probably that's the behavior we want to emulate ourselves using this. So yeah, using the play state will not cut it. We will have to use play position, the current playback position as of last block in seconds. That's what we'll have to use. Let's go to the block, and we'll have another one of those variables. So to begin with, that's the meaning of this variable, and then at the end, that's the meaning of this variable. And I will have what am I calling it? Playback start, reset on play. And that is if the difference between the old position and the new position, I guess I would do it in the reverse order, though it doesn't really matter because I will take the absolute value of that, and the absolute value of that needs to be less than the sample rate divided by the block size. Now this is a division that is going to happen on every block, and that doesn't make me happy because I'm kind of wasting resources. I will have a variable for this then. Hang on, I need to check something. If you wish this code to not execute on start of playback or sample rate changes, you can set this one. Yikes! Sample rate changes. Hang on. I think that this paragraph is new. Let's read this carefully. The code in the init section gets executed on effect load twice, on sample rate changes and on start of playback. If you wish this code to not execute on start of playback or sample rate changes. Fuck, so we cannot have control over just start of playback. We have to take both start of playback and sample rate changes. Not rerunning the init block on sample rate changes can lead to issues if your algorithms do initialization that require knowing the sample rate. Well, sample rate at least is not something that you can automate, so sample rate changes are something that you are going to have to do, and then perhaps some plugins will misbehave and you have to close and reopen. I don't know, it's kind of bad. I'll take note of this. All memory and variables are 0 on load and are re-zeroed before calling init. To avoid this behavior, a script can define a non-empty, it can be trivial code that has no side effect, serialized section, which will prevent memory and variables from being cleared on init. What? Okay, so that's the reason why I keep putting serialized blocks, because the serialized block makes the variables not be zeroed again, which makes the number of channels available on the init block. But now that we have this, and we have a serialized block, this is making the thing only run the init block once, so we'll not get the magic and forgiving behavior of the init block being run twice on load, which bought us out of that bug of the true and false being used out of place and blah blah blah. It bought us out of that bug, so it may be buying us out of some other bugs. For instance, the number of channels may not be initialized, even with a serialized block, and that can be an issue over here. So I will have a debug equals the number of channels, and I really hope that the debug variable will be 2. And it is fine. Okay. And just to prove my point, if I don't have this serialized block, then debug is 0. See? All right. So I am in a good place. But where was I? I was here, and I was there, and looking at the play position. All right. And specifically, we were looking at start of playback. It uses the terminology over here in this part of the documentation. It uses the terminology start of playback. That's the terminology I am going to use as well. So reset on start of playback. Reset on start of playback. And this is the play position. That's internal. That's necessary to compute the start of playback. And everything was on the sample namespace. Everything up to this point was on the sample namespace, and now I'm introducing stuff to the block namespace, but I think I would just introduce this into the sample namespace. It makes more sense this way. And I was introducing a variable to extract this information, even though the sample rate changes will not trigger the init block, and this whole thing is gonna fall apart. But whatever, I'm going to pre-compute this variable because doing this division every time is just a silly waste of resources. Sample duration or block duration. That's what it is. It's the duration of a block in seconds. Is this right though? Let's think about this for a moment. Suppose that my sample rate is 48,000 hertz. So 48,000 samples per second. And suppose that my block size is 24,000 to make things simple. Then this will be, I have it the other way around. I want the block size divided by the sample rate. So the block size being 24,000, the sample rate being 48,000 gives me half, 0.5. And 0.5 is the duration of a block in seconds. That's what I wanted. And what I'm checking is if the difference between where the playhead is and the playhead has been is greater than the block duration. If that difference is greater than the block duration, it means that we are not playing continuously. We have just jumped ahead. Well, that will give us this, right? When we do this, it will reset. But it will not give us just this. We'll need another variable for this. We'll get there. What is block size? Maybe samples block. Thank you. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, we'll need to keep this stage. Well, it only makes sense for the thing to be the start of playback if playback is happening. And we have a magic variable to tell us that. Play stage. So it is the start of playback if the previous stage was not playing or recording, this will get a bit complicated and annoying, so I will do this enumeration in code to help us out. It is the sample play stage. We have 1, 2. What is that stage? I don't know. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have 6 of these. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have 6 of those. And I will cut the descriptions and I will paste the descriptions. Naturally, this is this. And then I will copy the values. So 0. Error is less than 0. I don't really have a way of representing that, so I am not just going to ignore this stage. 1 and 2 and 5 and 6. What happened to 3 and 4? So, how do I know if the playback is just starting? It could be that we were here and then bam, that is the start of playback. So the previous stage was stopped and the play stage, the current stage, is playing. But it could also be that the previous stage was paused or record paused. So the previous stage was equal to stopped, or the previous stage was equal to paused or record paused. Under all those circumstances. So those are the allowed previous states, parentheses, and here come the allowed new states. So play stage is either playing or recording. Yeah, that. So if it moves from any of these states into any of these states, it means that we just started playback like this. Bam, starting the playback. I'll put one extra set of parentheses, but they are optional, but I'm gonna put them anyway to make this hopefully a little bit better to read, because this is getting out of hand. Or, and that's another condition, so it's the start of playback. If we went from one of these states into one of those states or if this change in the play position happened. So you are playing, you don't go to stop, to the stopped stage, you just click somewhere, moving the playhead. That will have the effect of setting the start of playback again. And I'm thinking I'm just going to put undefined here, just because I don't know if that is available on the init block. I don't think it is. So this, to be clear, this code is running on the init block as the library is imported. And this is the play stage is not even available in that context. So that would be 0, which means stopped, which is okay. But I think it's more intention revealing if I say undefined. And let's look at how this is used. It's used to check against existing states. So if it's undefined, it will not match any of the previous states. So start of playback will never be true. And that's exactly what I want. Great. Now, if you are playing and you load the effects into the track, then start of playback is not going to fire, but that's okay because the init block will have run. Okay, we nailed this. I think. That was complicated. I guess play stage 4 means record, which is then combined with 1 for recording and 2 for paused. It's like a tape machine, right? Where you press play and record. Or I guess the record button presses the play button as well. And then you can pause and go, yeah, okay, I can see where they were, what their mindset was. Ridiculous. And I think, oops, calls coming in. Right, so I think that, hang on, I will answer here and I'll be back in a moment. Oh, I am back. Weird. I pressed the key to go back to streaming and then it didn't show as streaming, but then it did. And it was like a fool, like I was streaming this whole time. Anyway, I was able to go to the other screen, so at least you didn't see me replying to the message. Anyhow, back to business. So this may not be, this may be too close because if you're just one block away and you skip something, and then this may be cutting it too short. So it is the start of playback. If this difference is greater than, and this is 1 block duration, let's make it like 5 blocks duration, okay? Just because this is going to run on every block and I don't want to cut it so short as to have some exact timing. I don't know what is even the granularity of play position. So with all of this in place, let's test this. So we are not really using this anywhere, right? We are setting this, but we're not using it. So here's what's up. Here's how things happen right now without us using that variable. There is this new option to reset on start of playback, and it is off, and I turn it on, and it doesn't do anything. It doesn't work. Now let's use this variable. Right here where we do the resetting. So I want to reset if I need to reset for other reasons, or parenthesis, if reset on start of playback is set and it is the start of playback. Simple enough. Let's give this a try. So now it is working just fine, and I start the playback and I move my cursor around and it continues to scroll by. If I set it on, then I start the playback and it resets, and I move my playhead and it resets. Okay, there's just one problem. When it is playing, it is resetting the whole time. It shouldn't. Why is it resetting the whole time? Could it be this part? Or perhaps this part? I'm willing to blame the second part. The first part seems more straightforward. So let's comment out the second part and see how things work. Yeah, the second part was to blame, unsurprisingly. Oh, and this was not on. Okay. Yeah, the second part was to blame, unsurprisingly. But now if I move my cursor around, this doesn't reset as it should. But if I stop and then restart, it resets. As it should. Great. So there is only this case of jumping around with the playhead going. There is only this case to fix. Let's look at this block duration variable to see if I computed things right. It should be a relatively small number. In fact, it should be 256 divided by 48,000. That's the length of one block in seconds. It's 0.05, no, it's 0.005 seconds. 0.005 seconds. And then let's look at the variable called sample block duration. 0.005. Sample block duration, it's 0. That's a problem. Samples block may be a variable that is only available in the block section. It is available in most contexts. The samples block variable can be used within the block section to see how many samples will come before the next block call. It may also be valid in other contexts, though your code should handle invalid values in other contexts with grace. Well, here is what I'm going to do. This variable was only an optimization, so I'm not going to optimize anything. To hell with optimizations. Just make sure I copied and pasted this from chat, but yeah, right, okay. So I will not optimize. It's just one division. Okay, I'll get by with that. Now we are talking. And this will respond better to sample rate changes anyway, so that's a good thing. Anyway, let's see if that works. So as I play and move my playhead, nothing resets, and I turn this on, and it resets on play, and it resets when I move my cursor around. So that was what was up. I tried to optimize things too early. Don't do that. All right, we sort of recreated the behavior of the init block, but without the init block. And this is the kind of trickery that I think will make people like the library. I don't know how people are going to use the library. I don't know if the library is going to be used by anyone who isn't me. But if they do use the library, I think that this is the sort of thing that people will be like, oh, I'm so glad that he figured this out so I don't have to. Because this is so annoying to write, but yeah. All right. And with that, I can very securely say that we handled the case of controlling whether or not the waveform resets on playback start. And what happens on sample rate changes? We have to look. Okay, I will commit what I have. Silly. And I will look for S rate, but not everywhere. Files to include. Oh, okay, Leafact and S rate. And this doesn't matter, that doesn't matter, that doesn't matter, that doesn't matter. Here things matter. Okay, these functions are sometimes called on the init block. So that could be an issue. This is not called on the init block, so that's okay. And this is okay as well, because this is running on the JSFX block. Yeah, so it should be okay. I guess the only issue could be the conversion from milliseconds to samples, which will determine some things like the length of some buffers on the init block. And if the init block doesn't rerun when you reset the sample rate, that could go wrong. The solution for that would be, again, to sort of recreate this behavior. So we would have to detect that the sample rate has changed, and that's simple enough. We just store the old sample rate, look at the new one, compare. But then we would have to have this whole initialization, the parts that depend on things like the sample rate. We would have to have that as a separate function that we would call under this condition of the sample rate changing. Yeah, that's what we would have to do. Because we don't want to necessarily rerun the init block when you start playback. But we definitely want to rerun the init block if the sample rate changes. It's just, it is what it is. But how often are you changing sample rates anyway? You are often changing buffer sizes. But sample rates? Not really. Anyway, I will keep this here because the correct solution is a lot of handstanding, but perhaps we will address that in the future. Oh boy. All right. I'm going to wrap this up. Tomorrow I will go into this. I am afraid of that, but I will go into it. I will go into the mouse interactions in JSFX. I have never worked with them before. All my plugins so far use sliders. Never touched the mouse stuff. But we'll get there tomorrow. Yikes. All right. Thank you, Theo and Joseph and Bo, for joining me here on the chat. Thank you everyone else who is watching this and not being active on the chat. I really appreciate you being here. I hope you are enjoying this ride. I wish you the best Wednesday you can have, and I will see you again tomorrow at 6:30, the hour where I live. It will be a different hour for you. You know when to find me. See you tomorrow. Bye. Thank you for watching the stream. You know how great it has been. Or maybe it sucked, and I am glad that you stuck with me. And soon we'll all will be back together for some more coding or talking or chilling. The next time I'll be streaming.